President. Last week, I spoke on 5 of the steps that we need to take to increase domestic oil production. And today I would like to take just a few moments to speak more broadly about our nation's energy policy as a whole, what the proper goals for such a policy should be, and the false choice between increased domestic production and reduced oil consumption. Energy policy has repeatedly been brought up as an area where this Congress and this President can find common ground. Knowing that something actually needs to be done, however, is no guarantee that it will be done. But the truth of it is, most of us know that we can improve in the area of energy. And with oil prices at above $100 a barrel, the price at the pump heading towards $4 a gallon, we need to develop a coherent national energy policy to find that common ground. That need has taken on even greater urgency. So what makes for good energy policy, and how can we ensure that agreement is finally reached on meaningful energy legislation? I think we should have essentially 5 goals. And those 5 goals are an energy that is abundant, that is affordable, that is clean, diverse, and domestic. Now, I realize that these words, especially in combination with one another, don't lend a clever acronym or a catchy slogan. Maybe we need to rearrange them and figure out what word we can make. But if we follow these as our guiding principles and make sure that our legislative efforts reflect each and every one, I believe that genuine progress can be within our reach. So let's start with the concept of affordable energy, because that's certainly the most relevant topic right now. Times like these serve as a wake-up call as to how important energy, and particularly affordable domestic energy, how important this really is to our nation. Energy provides the base of everything that we do, not just to heat and power and light and transportation, but the food that we eat, the clothes that we wear, everything. Whether for a server farm or for a soybean farm, abundant and affordable energy is really the foundation for a robust economy. But unfortunately, there seem to be those who feel that the key to clean energy is to make energy scarce and expensive. We don't need an experiment or an act of Congress to know that an economic recession reduces emission, and a depression, of course, would even do more so. The current price of oil is a stark reminder that while making energy scarce and expensive may in fact reduce our emissions, it's an even more effective way to crush an economic recovery. That's not good for us. The President has proposed that we should raise the taxes on oil companies. But in the middle of tough economic times, the American people are not open to those policies that will increase their energy costs. There is a better path that would do more to bolster our energy security, more to create jobs, more to generate government revenues, and equally more to reduce our deficit. Instead of punishing one industry to promote another, let's use our tremendous reserves of conventional resources, which account for more than 80% of our energy supply. Let's use these to fund the next generation of clean technologies. Let's prove up and produce our resources, and then put these revenues towards, whether it's tax incentives, whether it's additional research, whether it's studies at our universities, you name it. But let's use these wisely. Now, speaking specifically to the regulatory burdens on energy, I think we all recognize that the Clean Air Act has made our air cleaner and certainly improved our health. Carbon monoxide, SOx, NOx, a host of other pollutants have largely been removed from smokestack and tailpipe emissions. And there's more that we can do, I think we recognize, in terms of the regulation of HFCs and other greenhouse gases, which, while they emit much lesser quantities, they certainly have potent greenhouse effects. But the Clean Air Act is not the proper legal framework for regulation of carbon dioxide, which is emitted in huge quantities by almost every human activity, whose effect cannot be confined to a non-attainment area, and which in itself is not harmful to health. All of us, Madam President, want a cleaner energy supply. But the approach taken over the last several years seems to have been one of all or nothing instead of the all of the above approach. And I think it's been counterproductive. We need to seek out and accept policies that will lead to steady progress. Now, we don't yet know the best way to provide energy that is clean and abundant and affordable. But what we do know is that there is a whole myriad of opportunities. We have oil, natural gas, we've got wind, we've got solar, we've got hydro, we've got geothermal, coal, biofuels, fission, fusion. Just naming the types of energy and the subcategories within energies, that's a whole floor speech in and of itself. And whether it turns out to be fireflies that you collect in a bottle or something that we simply haven't even imagined yet, we don't know what source or what combination of sources will actually turn out to be best for America. And that should be cause for those of us here in Congress to be extraordinarily careful in trying to predetermine what sources should either win or lose. We're always talking around here about we need to steer clear of picking winners and losers, and yet that's what we do all the time. A diversity of energy sources provides the best proving ground and insurance against over-reliance on any one source, and a healthy economy provides the best demand for the cleanest sources available. Winston Churchill once said, "On no one quality, on no one process, on no one country, on no one route, and on no one field must we be dependent. Safety and certainty in oil lie in variety and variety alone." Now, Winston Churchill was talking about oil, but his words are just as applicable to our need for diversity in all of our types of energy. Now, finally, the need to make our energy domestic to the greatest degree possible is something that we've all known. We all know that we need to do this, but we have failed to do anything about it for decades. And it shouldn't take an upheaval in North Africa to convince us that sending billions of dollars a day out of our economy to countries that are not our friends, that this is a bad idea. We know it's a bad idea, and yet we continue year after year after year. We need to focus on two parallel tracks here: increased domestic production and decreased consumption. We absolutely should reduce our dependence on oil. In the early days of the automobile, we saw a wide range of experiments in inventors and entrepreneurs who strove to find the best approach. And I think, again, we're on the verge of this renaissance in vehicle technologies where we explore electric vehicles, we look at biofuels, fuel cells, efficient diesels, natural gas, propane, other approaches. But for right now, for today, Madam President, we use 20 million barrels of oil a day. And for the vast majority of uses, there is no imminent substitute. I said last week in my comments that for the sake of our national economy, for the sake of our nation's security, and for the sake of the world's environment, we should produce the highest possible percentage of the oil that we consume here at home. Domestic production is currently being stifled by those who engage in what, I don't know, I guess you call it a magical thinking, that if only we would stop producing oil here in the United States, then the world's need for oil is going to go away. Well, the Skittles are going to fall from the sky, you're going to have unicorns prancing in the street. It's not real. The harsh reality is that our foreign oil dependence contributes to conflicts where young men and young women die or come home without limbs, and we wreck our economy. There always will be future conflicts in the world, whether in the Middle East or elsewhere, and as a nation, we will have to decide on our proper role in each. We can and we should do everything possible, however, to eliminate foreign oil dependence as a strategic consideration. And Madam President, none of this is due to America running out of oil. In Alaska, my home state, we have estimated reserves in excess of 65 years' worth of Persian Gulf imports. So again, in Alaska alone, one state, we've got reserves in excess of 65 years of what we take from the Persian Gulf. There are also, of course, tremendous reserves in other states and, of course, offshore. But for decades, opponents of domestic production have argued that we shouldn't produce more because we're not going to see this come online for years to come. If 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago, we had ignored those who had said that ANWR was unacceptable because it would take a decade to develop, we would now, at this point in time, be enjoying another 1 million barrels of domestic production per day. But we said 10 years ago, 20 years ago, that it's going to take too long to bring that ANWR oil online, and so we just ought not do it. Well, look where it puts us today. Opponents also like to say that the policy of increased domestic production will have no immediate effect on oil prices. You don't even want to waste time arguing the folly of trying to dismiss good national energy policy because it's long-term. I'll also note that using the strategic oil reserve to mitigate high oil prices, to maybe push them back below $100 a barrel for a short term, maybe a couple weeks, this should be unacceptable to us. It should be unacceptable. We need a viable long-term answer, not a short-term and short-sighted political alibi. There is nothing that OPEC fears more than America committing to the twin tracks of increased domestic production and reduced consumption. Were we to do so, you would see OPEC doing everything in their power to drive down world oil prices, to make us abandon our policies, and once again, hamstring ourselves, once again, make us reliant on them for our oil. But I want to offer an important perspective on this. Even if you cannot accept that America increasing production and decreasing consumption would affect global oil prices, remember, price is not the only reason to advance such a policy. Right now, the high price of oil works against America, and it works for every nation that deliberately produces its reserves. Production provides them with jobs, it provides them with revenue for their governments, it provides better trade balances and national security, but all at our country's expense. We are the only country that has identified a huge resource base and then absolutely refused to produce it. So often we hear on this floor discussion about China eating our lunch in clean energy, about Japan and Germany outpacing us in wind and solar technology. But does anybody think that if those countries had a Gulf of Mexico or an ANWR, that they would not be drilling in those areas as we speak? Does anyone think that those nations demagogue nuclear power or refuse to permit coal plants? Their energy policies are on better track than ours. They're not just looking at what is happening today. They're looking tomorrow. They're looking today. They've got an energy policy that carries them out. There's an article in the Wall Street Journal yesterday by Nansen Saleri. He concludes his article with the statement that the U.S. does not have an energy problem. It has an energy strategy problem. Think about that. It's not lacking the resources. It's the strategy for how we develop our energy resources. During his campaign, President Obama liked to quote Dr. Martin Luther King, and he talked about the fierce urgency of now. And there are few issues more important or more fundamental to our nation's long-term success than a viable energy policy. People are very correct when they say that parts of this will take time. Parts of it will take a longer period of time. But now is never more fiercely urgent than when we have such an important and such a long journey ahead of us. If we're ever going to take control of our energy future, now is the time to come together, support the policies that promote abundant, affordable, clean, diverse, and domestic energy. Critically important to us, Madam President, and I look forward to these conversations that will continue on the floor as we talk about ways that we not only work to reduce our budget, ways that we not only work to create jobs in this country, but ways that we truly build a strategic energy policy for the long term for this country. Thank you, Madam President. With that, I yield the floor and suggest the absence of quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.